You've been involved in this for the last few weeks with your social studies teacher, whether it's your history teachers, your contemporary world teachers, right? You've been going over issues. There were 4 issues that were shared with you. You discussed things in class. You discussed platforms. Then you submitted questions. Well over 100 questions were put inside a shared document, about 25 for each of the topics. And then this committee of your peers, the electoral debate committee, read them all, analyzed them, reflected upon them, and selected 4. I do not know what these questions are. Mrs. Select doesn't know. Nobody knows, except for them. The candidates are going to find out in a few moments. Okay? So this is completely unprepared. It is fair. It is transparent. I'm going to repeat what Mrs. Select said, though, about the importance of listening, having an open mind, and finally being respectful. Okay? I will ask you to clap only at the end when they have finished their presentations or finished the specific segments. Right? So you hold your applause, that way there's no distractions. At the end of the formal debate, there will be an opportunity for you to ask questions. Very simple rules. You raise your hand, they will select you. Somebody will bring you a microphone. You will stand up. You will state your name, your grade level, and your question, and who you are directing your question to. Don't direct it to me, I'm not answering you. Okay? And then you will sit down and you will listen to the answer. Okay? So it's about engaging you guys as well. Also, I'd like to welcome everybody who's watching us online. Your moms, your dads. I hear somebody's grandmother's watching. Right, Jacob? So, Jacob, Grandma, hello. So here we are. We haven't done this in 4 years. We may be a bit rusty, but I'm sure it's going to be a great debate. So without any further ado, the moderators, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, Kuper Academy. I am Jacob LeCoupe, and this is my co-moderator for our 2022 Babes Waguniosta Rice.
Here's our timekeeper, Olivia Epiphany, and our 2 media supervisors, Boris Tishkov and Gloria Casarado Digny. I also want to give a huge shout out to Jacob LeCoupe because it is his birthday today.
Thank you. This is our candidate, Mr. Gary Charles, and he is running on behalf of the Conservative Party of Quebec to become a member of the National Assembly. Born in Montreal, he has gained experience in the field of politics and business as an MBA from the John Molson School of Business and a Bachelor of Communications from McGill University.
On the left, this is our candidate, Gregory Kelley. He is running on behalf of the Liberal Party to become a member of the National Assembly. Born in Montreal, he has gained experience in the political field as a political advisor consultant as well as a conseiller politique. He has obtained a bachelor's degree at McGill as well as a master's degree at Queen's University. Now, each candidate will have 5 minutes to make opening remarks, and no questions will be taken from the audience.
Good afternoon, guys. I'm really happy to see you guys all out here on Friday afternoon. I'm sure you're all excited to get to the weekend. So, bear with us for a good hour of political discussions. Thank you for the introduction. Thank you very much, Kuper Academy, for organizing this. Thank you for the very professional briefing that you gave to us too. The cookies and the water made everything feel a little bit less stressful, so it's always a little bit difficult getting up speaking before a crowd of people you don't know. But this is the second opportunity I've had to come before Kuper during a political debate. The last time was in 2018, and it was a lot of fun speaking to you guys. It was a good crowd, it was respectful, so I'm happy to be back here again. Born and raised in the West Island, I come from Beacon Hill. I went to Beacon Hill Pool, I was a lifeguard, studied at BHS, went to John Abbott, after that went to McGill, where I did a degree in political science and history, followed that up with a master's from Queen's in public administration, and then started a career in government, political affairs, and learned quite a lot. And then 2018 came up, and I was able to win my election then. In the last 4 years, I will definitely say that on my 2018 bingo card, I did not have a global pandemic as being one of the things that I would have to help the community get through as an elected official. I know a lot of you guys, and I just want to say this, thank you for everything that you did during the pandemic, because I know it was not easy on students and the youth. And often the government did not speak with you about what your concerns were, what was going on in your lives. Not having the chance to go play sports, not having the chance to go hang out with friends. The last 2 years were not fun for anyone, but I never forgot that the youth were definitely impacted by what was going on. I created a youth council in 2019, and we were about 15 youth who spoke a lot during the pandemic about what was affecting them, a lot of issues of mental health. A lot of times we would just discuss politics in general. So I just wanted to say thank you to you guys for everything that you did during the pandemic to keep others safe and to keep your families safe. What is my campaign all about? My campaign is all about bringing people together. The last 4 years, we have seen a lot of politics of division from François Legault and the CAQ. For me, whether you are Francophone, Anglophone, Allophone, or Indigenous, whether you were born here or not, you belong. And I'm tired of having a premier who links immigrants to criminality. I am tired of a premier who says Indigenous people are just playing words when they talk about systemic racism. I am tired of a premier who picks on the English-speaking community of Quebec for no good reason at all. For us to advance as a society, we have to do it together. We have to build bridges. And rights are bridges that bring people together, and I think it's important to stand up for the rights of all people. But at the same time, it's also the tone of our premier. That is the hardest thing for me right now, when he goes on public TV to pick on people. And I can tell you, the premier you're seeing now is the one I have been seeing the last 4 years in the National Assembly when I stand up to ask questions. The same attitude. He's grumpy, he doesn't like people who don't think like him. It's not the way to build an inclusive and united society. So that's what I'm out there campaigning for, guys, is to make a change in Quebec, and also just to be a strong local representative in my riding of Jacques-Cartier and in the West Island. So that's my opening pitch to you. I would also just like to say that I'm happy that Gary is here, because it would be great to have the CAT candidate here, because the last 4 years, they were the ones who were making a lot of decisions. I think both of us would like to talk to them and ask some questions in this debate, but I know we'll have a good exchange between us two. I met Gary out on the campaign trail, so I'm looking forward to having a great exchange with you guys. Thanks for being here. Thanks for listening to me.
Hello. Sorry about that. First, I want to thank Kuper Academy for inviting me to this wonderful event. Thank you very much. So I'll tell you a little bit about myself. My wife and I have been residents of Nelligan for 30 years and counting. And we hope that our 3 children will choose to reside in Quebec when the time comes to raise their own families. I'm what you call a typical West Islander, the type that François Legault is not crazy about. I attended John Rennie High School and later John Abbott College. I earned my Bachelor of Commerce from McGill and an MBA from John Molson School of Business. Though I learned the rudimentary basics of the French language in high school, it wasn't until I ran a company of 100 employees that I improved my French language skills. Like so many Anglophone entrepreneurs, I respected Bill 101. And like so many of you, I was content that we finally had linguistic peace in this province. And today I have two careers. First, I'm a commercial and residential real estate broker. And second, I'm the president of a meal preparation company called Keto Teria, and we specialize in producing frozen keto meals and desserts. The main reason I got involved in politics is very simple. It's Bill 96. Bill 96 is the most divisive and destructive law that I've ever seen passed by a Quebec government. So why are we here? Why is there talk of the imminent demise of the Liberal Party? It all started when they voted unanimously in favor of Bill 96 after the first two readings. Now, we need to go back 10 years to understand why the Liberals initially supported Bill 96. Dominic Anglade was an ardent nationalist who ran and lost as a CAQ candidate in 2012. She even served as president of the CAQ at the time. Madame Anglade joined the Liberal Party in 2015, and 3 years later, the Liberals suffered a devastating defeat. Francophone support hit rock bottom. The Liberals managed to hold on to 19 Montreal seats, despite taking Anglophone votes for granted. Now let's fast forward to 2021. The Liberals needed to prove their nationalist credentials to win back Francophone support. And this, my friends, is why they supported Bill 96. Never mind the Anglophones. Through thick and thin, they will always vote Liberal. Legault played the Liberals like a fiddle. He knew that if the Liberals opposed Bill 96, they'd permanently lose whatever remaining Francophone support that they had. And here we are in 2022, and Francophone for the support for the Liberals is in single digits. Their strategy backfired. To make matters worse, the Liberals' initial support of Bill 96 translated into a significant loss of support from their base in Montreal. To stop the bleeding, they voted against Bill 96 in the final reading. There's a new paradigm in Quebec politics. We know that the issue of separation is behind us when less than 1 in 5 Quebecers support the cause. The fact is, both legacy parties, the Parti Québécois and the Liberals, have lost their relevance. The only justification for the Liberals' existence was to serve as a counterweight against separation. We always voted Liberal because we love Canada. It was either vote Liberal or Quebec becomes a country. We never had a choice. Now, in this election, our community has an option, the Conservative Party of Quebec. We will faithfully represent you in the National Assembly. We will never throw Anglophones under the bus to appease the nationalists. Our first order of business when we form government will be to repeal Bill 96 in its entirety. Now, the Conservatives are much more than an anti-Bill 96 party. The first thing you should know is that we are a fiscally conservative party. We believe that we can lower taxes significantly by managing the growth of our burgeoning bureaucracy. We also want to get government out of our personal lives. We are in favor of reclaiming our individual rights and freedoms. And we are also a socially liberal party. A woman will always have the right to choose. We are committed to helping reduce global emissions in a responsible way. We will finally fix our broken healthcare system, and we have a great plan to fix our daycare system. Please remember to exercise your democratic right to vote, and it's the only way we can make things happen.
Thank you, Mr. Charles.
At the same time, doctors and nurses with international certifications are being turned away. There is already staff shortages in hospitals, which is raising many problems. How will this be dealt with?
I'll start off at least that, especially for our community that is highly bilingual, when the Premier goes out and bashes on immigrants and bashes on minorities, that doesn't really create a climate in this province where people are going to say, hey, I want to stay here and make a go of it, and my future here is bright. So I would invite the Premier to maybe change his tone. It's funny how, as I had mentioned, he has a problem if somebody's wearing a hijab or a turban teaching you in the classroom, but when he goes to get a dose of the vaccine and the person's wearing a hijab, not that much of a big deal. I find that quite hypocritical from our Premier, and he should do much better. I think one thing that is really important, if we want to talk about working conditions for our nurses, there's one thing that would help out quite a bit to reorganize their workload, and that would be nurse-to-patient ratio. We have done studies. This works. It could really help our nurses have a less of a burden in our hospitals. I think for our doctors too, if we're thinking about family doctors, one of the things I often hear them complaining about is they have a lot of paperwork. We have to make sure we reduce that so they have more time for patient care, less time writing down on papers. And finally though, for credentials, yesterday at the train station in St. Anne de Bellevue, I spoke to somebody who was a dentist and she said, Greg, the process when I came here in 2018 to try to get my papers sorted out, I practiced in my other country, I would be able to help fill a gap in the major labor crisis we have here in Quebec, but instead I had to go back to school. I'm now focusing maybe on doing something different. I think the government of Quebec could do a lot to reduce that problem and help immigrants who do come here with skill sets integrate into the workforce, do stages, and contribute plainly and not be underemployed.
I'd like to talk a little about healthcare, so I prepared this little speech. My 24-year-old daughter has been on the waiting list for a family doctor for over 2 years. As of 2022, she's joined by another 1 million Quebecers. My wife's gynecologist recently retired and she can't get a replacement. My own doctor arranged for me to have minor surgery in Hawkesbury, Ontario, because the waiting time in a Montreal hospital was 12 months. Now, I'm sure every one of you has got a negative story to tell, and there's no other way to say it. Our healthcare system is a disaster. Now, what do Switzerland, France, Germany, Sweden, Denmark, the Netherlands, and the UK have in common besides being countries in Europe? They all allow parallel public and private healthcare systems to serve their clients. All these countries outperform Quebec in every metric. The Conservative Party proposes to emulate these European healthcare systems to modernize our own system. We're not suggesting a two-tier system where only the rich get private care and the rest of us go public. The parallel system will be available to every Quebecer. We will allow the RAMQ to reimburse patients for private medical care when the public sector waiting times have been deemed unreasonable. Now, I showed our healthcare platform to 3 doctors. I think it's a good idea to get feedback from those on the front lines. One is a family doctor, the other one is a urologist who's working in the public system, and the third is a cardiologist who moved his practice to Texas. And all 3 concluded that the Conservative Party healthcare platform is the best that they've seen to date.
Yeah, for family doctors, there's no doubt you're on the list, I'm on the list, a lot of your parents are probably on the list. It's definitely been frustrating under the CAC's last 4 years. The numbers have just skyrocketed. One thing, again, that I think is really important is that we have super clinics here. So having more super clinics in the West Island to provide doctors a place to practice would be extremely helpful. But one thing that has changed during the pandemic, I don't know if any of you guys here have ever been to StatCare or to Brunswick, a walk-in clinic where you got to go see a doctor because you weren't feeling well. Well, since the pandemic, that's all gone to just being online. So if you're a senior and you feel, you have a real problem in the morning, and you're like, I gotta go see a doctor, I don't have a family doctor, you go online, there's no appointment available. We need to make sure that our walk-in clinics are actually walk-in clinics, and you can go see somebody, because if not, where do you end up? In the emergency room. And right now, our emergency rooms are overflowing. So I think that's one policy solution that we can put into place that can maybe help alleviate some of the stress on the healthcare system. And also too, can we look at how pharmacists can play a larger role in our healthcare system to give you a prescription for antibiotics if you have strep throat, if you have an ear infection. But right now, a lot of these small issues you have ends up taking, some people have to go to the ER room because they need to see a doctor and they need to get a prescription. I think that's something that we can reorganize and change and make a difference in the wait times. Thanks.
Did you watch the debate last night?
I did.
So one of the questions that Dominic Anglada was asked was, what about this waiting list for family doctors? We're up to 1 million people waiting for a family doctor. And she said, yeah, it's in our platform. Every Quebecer deserves to see a family doctor, but the moderator kept pushing and saying, well, what's the plan? What's the plan? I read your Liberal healthcare platform 5 times, and I still don't get it. It starts off well. We are committed to offering a family physician to all Quebecers. And then there's 4 pages of fluff. I mean, I just don't get it. If you could just put in a few words, how are we going to solve this crisis? You know, we've been going through this before CAP, it's during the Liberal regime, for years and years, and we're at 1 million now waiting to see a family doctor.
Yep, there's no doubt this is not a problem that you snap your fingers and it's going to be over tomorrow. One thing we definitely have to do is we have to train more doctors and more nurses here in Quebec. We have to make sure that our universities accept more students, because right now there's way too many bright and brilliant students who get turned away. I think another thing that we definitely can continue to do is give a larger role to nurse practitioners and to super nurses in our system. I think that's another way that, yes, you can see a healthcare professional and alleviate pressure on the system. And for family doctors, I mean, one thing that we have seen is that a lot of people have gone to the private sector. We need to draw them back into the public. We need to make sure that they are not being burdened by all the paperwork they have to face. So it's a huge challenge. And I'm convinced we got to continue to make sure that doctors are well paid, that nurses are well paid. We got to be competitive with our neighbors, because we lose too many people who do decide to go, like your friend, to Texas, or decide to go to Ontario, BC, or wherever it may be. So it's a huge challenge. No one's going to say this can be done overnight, but that's the plan that we're putting forward to Quebecers. And again, a reorganization of the frontline system, I think, would help quite a bit.
For some reason, the word private is taboo in Canada. And it's something that I don't understand it. Would you be in favor of bringing in the private sector to help solve some of our problems? The way advanced Western European countries are doing. Like, why can't we borrow the ideas, the methods of what they're doing? I mean, what makes Canada and Quebec right and all those successful European nations wrong?
I don't necessarily see it as right and wrong. I think transforming your healthcare system to be identical to another country is difficult, but there is a role for private care already in the system. For example, ultrasounds. A lot of them are private clinics. We do have a role for going to do private surgeries that are covered by RANQ. In my experience, in the last 4 years, learning more and more about the healthcare system, the one thing is that the more private that does get involved, often does cost us quite a bit of money. So how do you have a balance where you have more private, but you don't let the private just charge whatever it wants, driving up our healthcare cost, which is already over 50% of our entire budget. So are the Conservatives planning on capping, controlling how much exactly can be charged by the private sector? How is that going to work, having a private hospital over a public hospital? It's something I'd be curious to hear from you, because those are ideas that were put forward by yourself in the CAC. Personally, I believe in a public system. I don't want there to ever be a move towards certain citizens can access the best, or there's a drain to the private and the public system suffers, which does worry me a bit with your Conservative plan. I hear what you're saying, Gary, that everyone will just walk in and it'll be covered. I'm just curious, how are you going to control costs? Because so far, private does drive up costs in our system right now. So I'm just curious to hear your point of view on that too.
In a monopoly, there are definitely inefficiencies. And bringing in the private sector would foster competition. Competition fosters efficiency. Efficiency fosters lower costs. That's what we need to work hand in hand with the private sector and have some competition. Have the hospitals compete for patients, and this is how we bring in costs down. The bureaucracy in the public system is getting out of control. You know, the administrative costs, the paperwork. I'm sure doctors spend half their time just filling out forms and going through the procedures rather than concentrating on taking care of their patients.
And just to add to our discussion, one thing that I have come to learn in the last 4 years working in politics and being elected representative is that when we talk about competition, the one thing is there's a lot of competition right now between hospitals for staff. And that's a huge thing that no matter what public plan you bring forward or healthcare plan you bring forward, we just have a shortage of workers, and that's a huge problem. And I just want to bring it back again to certain policies that CAC have brought in. If we need more nurses, doctors, and orderlies, how's that going to happen if we're reducing the number of immigrants we take in as a society? And also long-term, what are those impacts? Again, this is a question for the CAC because they're not here, but I always find that a bit hypocritical that, you know, this message, anti-immigration, reducing immigration numbers, when we desperately need workers everywhere. We need trained talent, and then we want that talent to stay here. So that's just one thing I wanted to add, because any hospital in this city right now needs another nurse, they need another orderly, they need another doctor, and there are going to be more doctors and all those professionals retiring. So we need to make sure that our immigration policy is welcome, it's open, that we increase it in order to make sure everyone can get proper services no matter where they are in Quebec.
Indigenous student here at Kuper Academy who hopes to attend CEGEP, Bill 96 imposes an educational barrier on Indigenous people and communities in Quebec who seek a higher education. So I asked the panel, how can Indigenous people be expected to learn a new language while also keeping in touch with our own language? Those who don't have any exposure to the French language have the language forced on them just to earn a quality education, which is unfair to those who want to learn and pursue their academic dreams and beat the stereotypes surrounding Indigenous people.
Thank you for the question. It's extremely important that we talk about in the context of Bill 96, the impacts it will have on Indigenous people, because Bill 96 creates two classes of citizens. You have, Francophones and historic Anglophones. Well, Indigenous people are neither. And I was at the National Assembly when I stood next to leadership, Indigenous leadership, who said we would like to be exempt from Bill 96. I went into parliamentary committee with actually Quebec Solidaire. We worked together to tell the Minister Simon-Jean Barrette that, like in Bill 101, you can make an exemption and make sure that this bill has no impact on Indigenous people. We showed the evidence. They wrote memoirs with arguments of why this is no good, and there was zero interest from the CAC to make any changes. So if the Liberals were to be re-elected, one of the first things we have to do, of course, is repeal Bill 96, take out the notwithstanding clause, take out all the sections that touch health and social services, take out all the sections pertaining to CEGEPs, take out, of course, the impacts it will have on Indigenous people, who, like you have mentioned, are already trying to preserve their own language and then have to go learn another language. So I really hope that the government would have listened, and they did not, but I will keep fighting to make sure that Indigenous people are removed from Bill 96.
I mentioned that Bill 96 was the most destructive law ever. And you can see from your very interesting question that the Indigenous rights are being trampled upon. The CAC knew what they were proposing was unconstitutional since they proactively used the notwithstanding clause. Bill 96 also violates 38 articles of Quebec's very own Charter of Rights and Freedoms. I'd like to point out a couple of examples of just the severity of this law. Imagine language inspectors entering your place of business performing a search and seizure without a search warrant. This stuff happens in North Korea and not in Quebec. Imagine a language zealot who notices a job posting where knowledge of English is required. Now, under Bill 96, this person can file a complaint against the hiring company that is perceived to have violated the law. Bill 96 tells business owners that there's a limit to how many jobs can be posted and where the knowledge of English is required. The Conservative Party is committed to protecting and promoting the French language. However, Bill 96 does nothing of the sort. This is why we promised to repeal Bill 96 in its entirety when we formed the government. The Liberals voted unanimously for Bill 96 in the first two readings. Their promise is to keep Bill 96 with some amendments. I just wonder if the Liberals believe that removing the notwithstanding clause will suddenly make Bill 96 a good law.
We will now have 15 minutes for you to make any rebuttals.
I voted on Bill 96 once, and I voted against it. He keeps talking about this reading. I didn't vote on any reading. It's parliamentary procedure. The bill goes from one step to the next. And I also would like to point out that the Conservative leader has said he's going to bring a Bill 96 2.0. He intends on bringing a new bill before Parliament on language, and there will be sections of it that he will keep. But I think we should go back to the topic at hand, which is about Indigenous peoples. And the real question I would like to ask Mr. Legault, and I have gotten up in the House to ask the Minister for Indigenous Affairs, did you adequately actually consult the Indigenous nations of this province? Because there is a constitutional right that goes above and beyond the notwithstanding clause. And there are court challenges out there right now, people are asking these questions. So yes, the notwithstanding clause, which is used as a blanket measure in Bill 96, does restrict many of your rights, like the equality before the law. But at the same time, our Canadian Constitution and our Quebec Charter of Rights, it will be interesting to see what the courts do have to say about this, because I firmly believe that the government failed miserably in its duty to consult our Indigenous peoples of Quebec on Bill 96, and for me that is totally unacceptable.
Well, when I said that the Liberals voted during the first two readings for Bill 96, it's on the record, it's in the parliamentary record, where on May 13, 2021, first reading of Bill 96, 121 for, 0 against, 0 abstentions. So that was the first reading. Second reading, November 4th, second reading of the Bill 96, 116 for, unanimous adoption in principle. So I'm not sure if you were absent during the vote, or did you vote with the party?
There was one opportunity to vote on the final Bill 96. The previous parts there were talking about the steps in the parliamentary procedure that the bill goes from one reading to another. It's not a vote on the content on the bill, it's on the procedure. I voted against Bill 96. Your party did not vote against Bill 21. Your party, it seems, has no issues with the government restricting a teacher having a hijab in the classroom. I don't have any lessons to learn from Conservatives on defending rights and freedoms of Quebecers, something I will always do, and I know exactly where I was in the Parliament on the day I stood up and said I was against Bill 96. Maybe look and see if that date's on your paper.
I'm not a parliamentarian, right, so I don't know all the ins and outs, but when I read unanimous adoption in principle, that means that, and it should mean what it says, unanimous adoption in principle. So I'd like to know, what parts of Bill 96 was the Liberal Party satisfied with during those first two readings?
By and large, I'm against the majority of Bill 96, but there's one thing in there that I think is quite reasonable. It makes access to French language training for all Quebecers more readily accessible. So at any point in your life you want to take more French language training, the government makes sure that that is free or at low cost for you. I'm sorry, I don't have a problem with that. I think that's something that can remain in place when we would go to repeal the majority of Bill 96. But again, I voted against Bill 96. Point final.
So, you were talking about the Conservative Party proposing a 96 2.0. First of all, it won't be anywhere near the Bill 96 that was finally adopted. And our focus is going to be on improving education in the French language. We're not going to start, Bill 96 wants to impose Francization to companies with less than 25 or more persons. There's also something in Bill 96 which makes absolutely no sense. The right to live in French. What does that mean? Does that mean that the Anglophones don't have a right to live in English? I mean, it's something that we would never put in our proposed replacement of Bill 96. And furthermore, our replacement will not be subject to the notwithstanding clause. We will let it ride through the courts and let the courts decide.
And that would be a great question if we had somebody from the CAC here, Gary, because what does those things mean? They wrote the bill, and they're not here to tell the students here what they want or what they intend by living in French, and a lot of the clauses are in there. So it's too bad the CAC's not here to try to answer the question you just put forward, and I can't answer it because I was not the one who wrote it.
Okay, for our next question, we have a question from Montana Fresh Cow. Both your parties state that you are under a service to improve and serve your citizens, but how will you help those who are poor and homeless, affected by inflation rates and rising housing prices, unable to provide for themselves and their families?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Both your parties state that you are under a service to improve and serve your citizens. But how will you help those who are poor and homeless, affected by inflation rates and rising housing prices, unable to provide for themselves and their families?
Well, I think you're referring to the unaffordability of housing right now. There is a crisis going on. We know that inflation is through the roof. Interest rates are out of control. Our proposal is not to become a real estate developer and to build thousands of social housing units. The government is not in the business of being a real estate developer. What we propose is to give the money directly to the people who need it. And we're not going to give money to real estate developers. We're going to give the money to the people so that they can make ends meet. And it's the easiest, quickest way to get a social housing unit built is if it's done through private enterprise.
So for the first part of the question, what can be done to try to help people who are struggling to make ends meet? The Liberal Party is proposing first for seniors a benefit of up to $2,000 to either help them stay in their homes, to help them make ends meet when they have to, pay the heating, pay for the grocery bills. We think that's something that could really help out our seniors who are already on a fixed income usually and always have to stretch their budgets a little further. We would like to cut taxes for the middle class, for a lot of Quebecers who are again in the same boat, just struggling right now to make sure they can pay all of their bills. When it comes to housing, there definitely is, in my viewpoint, a role for the government to play in social housing because there are still way too many people who are living on the streets of Montreal, who are living in transition homes, who could definitely use some social housing. And there's been a lot of money announced by the CAC, by the federal government, and by the City of Montreal for this. And I would really just hope that they all get their acts together to make sure that there is more social housing available on the island of Montreal, and to start also thinking about the surrounding areas of Montreal and other parts of Quebec where we could really use more housing for those who are less fortunate.
Liberals, you said you would increase electric transportation with cars, but making a battery emits a lot of pollution and greenhouse gases. Additionally, it's very costly, so where will the funding come from? Will we have to pay more taxes?
No plan, and they're not here, no plan like Quebec Solidaire to tax cars up to $7,000 in our platform. One thing I think we have to continue is to develop those minerals and resources here in province and at home. I think that's extremely helpful to make sure it's being done in an environment where there are strict environmental controls, and while most by and large are using energy that comes from renewable sources. There's no doubt that it does create some pollution and some emissions, but getting the resources from here in Quebec I think is most important. And again, the plan is not to raise taxes on that at all. We're trying to actually encourage people to make the switch to electric cars through tax incentives. The federal government has a tax incentive in place, a rebate for electric cars, and there's one in Quebec that was reduced recently by the CAC. But we still believe it's the best way to transition in the long term. If people are not using fossil fuels to drive to work, to drive to the daycare, to drive wherever they need to go, it will have an impact on our emissions long term, and it's the way to go. So that's my answer to your very good question.
Hello, my name is Michael from grade 9. The recent Russia-Ukrainian war, I believe it has been a wake-up call for most of the world. This global conflict has really exhausted the resources for many regions of the world. Here, Quebec will experience this with the raising gas prices. My question is, how will Quebec in the future be able to reduce these effects caused by these global conflicts to prevent such a sudden increase in prices in our daily lives?
Well, this is why I believe that Quebec and Canada should be self-sufficient in their energy needs. Now, we are in Quebec trying to push as much electricity as possible, but you'll also notice that Hydro-Quebec, they encourage the use of natural gas through their dual energy rates that they offer to consumers who want to use natural gas to heat up their hot water and their homes. So I think it's just a balancing of trying to get, just trying to be more reliant on our own resources, so that if ever there's another future war in Ukraine, Russia, we don't know who the next bad actor is going to be. We'll be in a position to withstand any shortfalls in production.
One thing for rising costs of energy, and this is something that CAC actually put into place when they first got elected, is they paired hydro rates to inflation. And I'll never forget, because I was in parliamentary committee with the minister, and I said in the committee, because in the 1970s we had a very high period of inflation. And I said, well, what happens again? What if there's a war or a global crisis that drives up inflation rates? And he said, no, the measures in place will, basically just told me it's never going to happen, don't worry about it. And lo and behold, there was a war that started in Ukraine and inflation rates have really skyrocketed. So at least that's one example, again, of this idea of, fixing things to inflation rates, not always the smartest thing in the world. I also do believe, right now, most of the oil or gas that is in your car comes actually from Alberta. We reversed the Energy NB Enbridge pipeline many years ago, so in our refineries, most of that oil is all coming from Canada, which is not a bad thing, and we export a lot of gas actually from here too, and oil or oil-like products. But again, being self-sufficient is extremely important. There will always be global crises that we can't change. The fact that Ukraine is a breadbasket of the world, and especially to developing countries, to feedstock across the world, that's something that's tough for Quebec or Canada to control itself. But buying local is by and far the best way to incite and encourage local businesses. So the more we can do that, the more ambitious food sovereignty programs we can have, the better, and the better we can perhaps protect ourselves from global crises that are far beyond the control of you or I.
My name is Max, and I'm in Sec 5, and this is a question for both parties. So, what would you do to make foreign companies more comfortable settling in Quebec? Like Popeyes, Chick-fil-A, Target, all those companies from the US.
You have the Chick-fil-A. Target unfortunately didn't work out here though. We had Target. But I mean, one thing is definitely not putting into place, Bill 96, Bill 21, things that don't encourage people. I mean, that's the attitude of the government. We make the headlines in the New York Times, in The Guardian. Like, people look and say, what's the business climate in Quebec? They're just having tons of politics and division. A premier who attacks the city of Montreal. That's not good. The Chambre de Commerce is very clear on a lot of piece of legislation. They're not good for the business climate of the province. And it would be nice to see a premier who stops bashing on Montreal all the time. He treats Montreal like it doesn't count and it doesn't matter, but we're the economic engine of the province. But one thing that Quebec does do well and can continue to do well is recruiting foreign companies. Dominic Anglade actually worked for a company, it's an organization that goes out to recruit companies to come to Quebec. And Montreal's done well, like the gaming industry is a great example, Ubisoft, all that. That's here in Montreal. That's because liberal governments went out and recruited that, brought in talent. That's extremely important. So we just can't discourage talent, especially in a climate where market is really hot for talent and labor. But again, I can't speak for Chick-fil-A. I don't know if they're like everywhere else, but it's something like that. Try to bring in those companies because who doesn't want to have a delicious hot piece of chicken to eat. But thanks for your question.
So I think the answer lies in Bill 96. We need to get rid of Bill 96 completely. But what happened before that? Most companies that do settle or they choose Quebec, they were quite satisfied with Bill 101. They made the adjustments that needed to be made, and it's something we had that linguistic piece. Bill 96, for example, I'm not sure if you read the story about OtterBox, the company that makes the iPhone cases. You go onto their website today and they say, due to Bill 96, we are stopping shipping our products to Quebec. So it makes us look really like a laughing stock from the rest of the world that we can't allow our citizens to buy from a website because of Bill 96. So that's the first thing. We've got to get rid of this law, and these companies will eventually settle in Quebec, including Popeyes. Mulligan was formed in the early 1980s, consists of the entire city of Kirkland, all of Ville-des-Arts, St. Geneviève, and also Pierrefonds. There have been 11 elections since its creation. The Liberals have won all 11 with an average of 70% of the vote. The only time they did not receive more than 50% of the vote was in 1989. And that's the year Liberal leader Robert Bourassa invoked the notwithstanding clause to make it illegal to put up signs in a language other than French. That was the year that the Liberal Party let us down. They let down the Anglophone and the Allophone community. Much in the same way that today's Liberal Party has neglected our needs and desires. Now, in 1989, there was a huge uproar from the Anglophone community. The Equality Party won 4 seats that year, including Greg's riding of Jean Cartier. Now, what the 1989 election tells me is that if there is enough conviction in our community, we can make a difference. You remember me talking about the two legacy parties in Quebec. The Anglophones at the time were willing to vote out the supposedly federalist Liberal Party and take a chance on having the arch-rival PQ gain power. This time around, there is absolutely no chance that a sovereignist party can win. We can confidently vote for a Conservative candidate without fear of opening up the door to Quebec separation. I truly believe that the Conservative Party is positioned to become the champion of individual rights and freedoms of all Quebecers. So let's make this happen. Please vote Conservative on October 3rd. Thank you.
You guys today asked phenomenal questions, so a round of applause to all of you. You guys are bright, smart, you're engaged, and for the rest of your life, keep asking questions to elected officials, to people you hear on TV. Use your brain, critically think. Don't just let people tell you that there is a certain truth. Go out there and yes, continue to learn more. Read books. It's extremely important. But I'm going to appeal to each and every one of you. Yes, I'm a politician. I have a voice. I have a seat at the National Assembly. I have certain responsibilities and duties to a community. But I can't make change alone. Politicians can't do it alone. Has to be each and every one of you in the rest of your life going on the path and continuing to try to be decent people. Because we look at the United States of America right now, families don't even like each other anymore because of their political affiliations. I had a great debate with Gary today. It was a lot of fun. I appreciate our exchange. It was friendly, it was good, and that's what you're supposed to have in a democracy, but we cannot let democracy falter. We cannot become our own worst enemies. So for you guys, I talk about the politics of bringing people together. And I will always try to convey positivity, work with people, and yes, there's partisanship and there's debates, and that's normal in a society. But the moment we start looking at one another and not liking each other because of our political beliefs, we are in trouble. And there is a hard time for any democracy coming back from that. So you as citizens, when you get the chance to vote, do it, take your duty seriously. Because in lots of parts of the world, you can't vote. In lots of parts of the United States of America, you can't vote and you're a citizen. And you don't think there could be a rolling creep of that attitude across the Western world? Don't be fooled. Don't be fooled. You guys will have the power to make change in the future, and just keep pushing. Because it's not just one time you speak about an issue, it's not just one time you thought something was important to you that things will magically change. You have to be persistent, you have to fight, you have to believe in your values, and you have to believe in yourself, and that's how you can make a change. I really appreciate being here with you guys today. Thanks a lot. Follow me on social media. If you ever have any questions, I'm open for it.